This week on the Bearded Banker podcast, getting creative in this market. It's tax season, very important for entrepreneurs. 203K loans, keeping it in the family, and update on the economy. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bearded Banker podcast, hosted by yours truly, Daniel Valencia, team leader and senior mortgage loan officer, NMLS number 957014. On this podcast, we discuss everything mortgages, money, and mindset. If you're listening, you may not know, but you can watch the video of this podcast on YouTube. And if you're watching, if you don't know, you can listen to this podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Either way, I appreciate you for taking the time and hope you find it valuable. And if so, you can do all the things that we know the almighty algorithm loves. But for now, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome back again, and thank you for joining podcast number 19. Had a pretty exciting week, and last week was the Super Bowl. Chiefs win again. I think in last week's podcast I said I like the Chiefs, so definitely went with the winners there. Great game, great halftime performance by Usher. Kind of slow in the beginning as far as the game, and then the second half, that fourth quarter, and definitely overtime were just electric. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, man, he's just, you can tell when you see an elite player in anything, any sport, any genre, any industry, just when they turn it on, man, he just took over that game. So great game. That was definitely enjoyable to watch. And Usher, I mean, definitely killed it. You don't realize how many hits somebody has till they do something like Super Bowl halftime show, right? But want to jump right in here. It is, what's today? February 17th. I'm recording this, so this will release on the 19th. We got some snow, and it's actually getting nice out now. But it's definitely feeling like winter, and it is tax season. So all my entrepreneurs, this is the time to work with your CPA, work with your tax professional to make sure that you are planning for home buying if you're looking to do that this year or before next tax season. And the reason why it's so important is because when you're self-employed, we qualify you for purchase based on what's on your taxes, right? It's not like a W-2 employee where they get a pay stub every 2 weeks, and whatever's on that pay stub, we just calculate it, 40 hours a week times the hourly rate, or there's a salary and you get the same thing every 2 weeks, right? It's a little different when you're self-employed. So when you're self-employed, you have gross income, right? The revenue that your business brings in. Then the benefit of having a business is that you can write off your business expenses, show less income, less net income that you actually get taxed on, and the goal is to show as little as you can so you pay as little taxes as possible. The problem with that is when you do that, we look at those taxes and now you try to qualify for a home and you've done that, for tax purposes, and your income can't support the payment that you're looking to qualify for. Now, you may know and we may know that you can definitely afford it, right? It's not an issue. We know how much money you're bringing in, but on paper, it looks a little bit different. So that's why this time of year is so important from now until April 15th, or even if you're going to file an extension and do it towards the end of the year, depending on when you want to buy that house, you have to prioritize that now. What happens is after your taxes are filed and part of the mortgage process, the mortgage pre-approval and approval process by underwriting so you can actually close on something, is to get the taxes for the pre-approval and then get the IRS transcripts from the IRS after your taxes have been processed for the actual mortgage commitment and clear to close so you can close on the property, right? So it's not just the tax returns. We actually have to see that those tax returns have been filed and that the transcripts we get from the IRS that we download from the IRS website match what you gave us in the beginning. Because what happens is, and before they started implementing these rules, pre-2008, people would send in a tax return, show amazing income, and then banks would use that, kind of go with it, and say, okay, let's approve this file based on this income. and then not check what was actually filed with the IRS, and then there's some changes that are made and lower income shown for the IRS so that the tax bill is a little bit lower, right? So that doesn't work. That's not going to get approved in this current market with the current guidelines. They're going to look at the tax return and say, okay, this looks good. Now we need the transcripts that match it to prove that this was actually filed, right? So you want to make sure you have that all in a line now so that we can move forward and approve you and close on a home if you're in the market and looking to buy soon. Now, how do we calculate that income? Usually, it's the last 2 years of net income averaged out, right? So if you've been showing losses or little income, break-even income on your taxes, and then now you want to file more income so you can qualify, well, we're going to average it out. So that loss or that break even from a year ago could still affect you. Now, if you've had your business for 5 years or longer, we can typically use just the most recent year of taxes. So if you're in that boat, if that's your scenario, then this tax return is super important because you can kind of show what you need to so long as you can afford it and the business actually generated that kind of revenue and you can afford the tax liability that's going to come from it to qualify for what you're looking to qualify for. So it's a little bit of a game we play. We say, have your CPA or tax preparer prepare the drafts, send them to us. We'll do some calculations and say, okay, based on this, if you file this number, here's what you'll qualify for. We don't tell you what to do. We just say, okay, based on these numbers, here's what it looks like you'll qualify for. If that works for you, fine. If it doesn't, maybe you want to go back to your CPA and adjust some things, and then also talk to your CPA about what the tax liability will be, because we have no say or suggestion or advice in that regard, right? So you definitely want to talk to them and make sure that you can afford whatever that liability is going to be. And another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about taxes, all qualification is based on debt to income ratios, right? So if we're saying, okay, based on this income, you'll qualify, right? Based on what you're showing here, everything looks good. But if that's going to result in a tax liability that you can't pay up front and clear out right away, and you want to go on a monthly payment plan, well, then that payment plan is going to come back and filter in your DTI, right? So now it's going to change the numbers and you might have to show a little bit more because you're adding in a debt. Now, if you can clear that debt completely, once you file this tax return and pay that debt to the IRS, then you're good to go. So just a couple of things to keep in mind during this time. It's tax season. I'm going through the same thing with my CPA because we're looking to, make sure that we can purchase something in the near future, and you kind of want to plan ahead even if it's a year or two out, because we do have a number of LLCs and different types of income coming in. We want to make sure it all looks good and but we're still saving on our tax bill as much as possible. So it's a little bit of a dance you have to do at this time. But again, this is the time to do it. So if you are looking to purchase a home, we'll work on that and we can coach you through it and see how we can make it happen. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is 203K scenarios. So a 203K, what is that? That's an FHA loan used strictly or solely for renovation of a property. So a regular FHA loan, the code for it is a 203B, and for the renovation aspect, the code is a 203K. That's where the name comes from. So FHA 203K. Now there are some conventional renovation loans as well. Conventional home style renovation, that's another loan you can use. These are for primary, secondary residences, and the home style loan will do single family investment properties as well. But why do I bring this up? Well, because the market's the market, right? We've been going through it for a couple of years now, where there's just a lack of inventory, a lack of great homes. If there are homes available, they're going for way over asking, and if they're available, at least in New Jersey, North Jersey, they're a little bit older and need some work if they're within a certain price range that you need to be in, right? If it's a budget-friendly house, it probably needs some work. If it's brand new, home run house, then it's probably going to go over asking and be out of budget anyway. So we're definitely suggesting looking into these 203Ks. Now, this episode is going to be a little convoluted. We're going to overlap some things because they all kind of tie together. I have a couple friends, really, really close friends, and some of my best friends also in the same boat, looking to take advantage of situations within their circle, within their family, right? That's why I mentioned in the beginning, keeping it in the family. You have to be creative in this market. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that the homes that are listed on the MLS, right? The multiple listing service, the homes that you see on Zillow. If you look on Zillow and you look at the, if you like save something or put the little heart emoji on it, you can see the number of saves. And if a home has just been listed, let's say in the last day, 24 hours, last week, and it has 100, 200, 1,000 saves, the competition is going to be pretty high for that property. I mean, already, because if you've been listening to the podcast and keeping, your finger on the pulse of the market, then you know how it is out there. But if you just look there, you'll see that, these homes are all getting viewed by hundreds of thousands of people, and that's your competition. Now some people are on there just fantasizing and dreaming, and some people are on there actually looking and pre-approved and ready to go, and some people on there are cash buyers just looking to jump on something. So you don't really know who's on there, but you can kind of tell by the activity online how that property is going to move. Now I say get creative. We say get creative because you want to find something that no one else is bidding on, right? Best case scenario, you find something off market, you find something that's through a friend or a family member, and you're not competing, and you can kind of make sure that the deal can work for you. So that's where these 203Ks come in, and keeping it in the family, going to kind of combine some of this stuff so we can make this point here and paint this picture. So if you're within your first-time home buyer age range, right, for our parents, that's probably come and gone. If you're my age, mid-30s, early to late 30s, somewhere 30 to 40, then it's kind of our prime home buying time. Some of us bought homes, in our 20s, maybe kept them, maybe sold them, did whatever, looking to make the next purchase now. And some of us haven't, jumped in the real estate market yet. But it might be about that time. If you're, 25 to 35, you're definitely in your prime first-time home buyer age range. Now, if you are, and you're in this market, we already know inflation is tough. We already know, how hard it is to make a buck. We already know what the competition's like to find a home and get something, get an offer accepted and all that. So what can you do? Well, my advice has been, especially to my close circle of family and friends, has been look into your network, your family and friends, people, your parents, people your parents' age, maybe your grandparents, right? Unfortunately, it's kind of morbid to say, but people are, dying, passing away, unfortunately, but they lived a long life. And around this age, your grandparents, people that have been in the neighborhood for years, maybe your parents, friends' parents, things like that. Just start to look into your network of people who may be unloading or liquidating or selling property that you can jump on, right? Even your parents, maybe they're retiring, they're around that age or getting close to it, trying to plan. Try to keep that real estate in the family. Try to take advantage of that so you don't have to deal with what's going on in the market. And I have a couple scenarios, couple friends that are looking to take over properties from their parents, their in-laws, grandparents, whatever the case is, and kind of want to talk through some of those scenarios. So in that case, there may be a situation where the house isn't 100% ready for you to take over, or maybe it's not exactly what you would want. Maybe there's some changes you would want to make if it was your house, and that's where a renovation loan could come in. Because if you take a renovation loan to the open market, right, so you're competing with all these people we've been talking about over the last couple of episodes, these heavily qualified conventional buyers, these huge down payments people have, whether it's their own or gifts from family or they're selling another house, these cash buyers that are coming in all cash, even these hedge funds. I don't know if you've seen the headlines, but these, hedge funds are buying up single family real estate left and right. That's the competition. It's tough out there, right? So you want to try to circumvent that however you can, and this may be a great way. So if you take a 203K into that competition, a renovation loan, and you got to put yourselves in the shoes of the seller, right? I said it last week too. If all these offers are coming in and you're trying to pick the best one because, one, you want the most money, or at least the most feasible amount of money that's still a smooth transaction, you want to make sure your buyer is solid, right? The worst thing for a seller is to accept an offer, make plans to move, or start budgeting differently or whatever the case is, and then a deal falls through because they didn't do their due diligence with the buyer, or they accepted a pre-approval that wasn't really, solid, or any number of things can go wrong, an appraisal, the value, things like that. So how do you put your best foot forward and make sure you're submitting a solid offer?
Well, there's a couple things that come into that. Do you need a loan at all, or are you cash, right? That's number one. So cash is king. If you do need a loan, is it a conventional loan? How much are you putting down? Are you putting down 3 or 5% as a first time home buyer? Are you putting down 20%? Are you putting down 50%? And this is kind of, it's frustrating in the industry. A lot of professionals will tell you that because the down payment doesn't necessarily reflect the overall financial stability or financial health of the buyer. Just like a credit score has no indication really as to someone's net worth or wealth or how good they are with their money, right? Because a credit score is looking at how much debt you have and are you making payments on time and the type of debt. So all it really means is that you're really good at taking out debt and making your payments on time. Has no bearing on how much money you make, how much money you have in the bank, or your wealth, right? So same idea with these down payments and these loan types, right? People look down on an FHA loan or look down on a first time home buyer loan with 3.5%, 5% down. They'll even look down on a VA loan, right? Veterans of our country with 0% down. And some people would be like, it's just, I don't know how solid it is. They're not really putting down any money. And I get it from the seller side too, because they're trying to separate these offers. They're trying to prioritize or evaluate these offers from strongest to weakest, right? And kind of put them in a line. And one of the easiest ways to do that is the down payment, right? Who's putting down the most money? Because that seems to signal some type of financial wherewithal. Is that true? Not necessarily. I've seen plenty of times where someone will come in with a huge down payment and, they're self-employed and their debt to income ratio is really, really close to qualifying. One thing goes wrong and it doesn't really matter how much they're putting down. Or someone's putting down a huge down payment, but it's a gift from family, not necessarily their own money, and their debt to income ratio or their debts or their credit score could not be the best, but they have this huge chunk of money, right? So it's not always an indicator of just how solid the pre-approval is, but unfortunately, this is the world we live in. These offers have to be evaluated some way, and usually that's the way. It's cash or loan, and then if it's a loan, what type of loan, and then down payment, right? So all of that can affect where you land in that hierarchy, right? Depending on what your situation is. So if we can avoid that without, having to deal with all that by going to, again, family, friends, your network, then you can kind of structure the deal where it makes the most sense for you and the seller's still getting their money. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much they're putting down, if it's an FHA loan or a conventional loan or whatever, the money's still green, right? It's still, at the end of the day, at closing, they're going to get the same amount of money that they agreed to for the purchase price in full, one way or the other. So it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, when there's so much competition, sellers can be a little picky, and that's kind of the way that society has been taught, and even listing agents and sellers who are advising and agents who are advising sellers tend to break it down that way. And then there's other terms, right? There's how quickly can you close? Are you waiving appraisals and inspections, right? Things we spoke about on prior podcasts. So again, we want to avoid all of that. So you want to start looking into your family and friends and network. Okay, who has property? Who's looking to unload it? Or what can we do here? So I have a couple friends that, they're looking to take over. One of them is looking to take over a property that their parents own. Their parents are looking to retire, and they just kind of want to travel and maybe come back here and there and have like a basement unit they live in, but they want to, travel and maybe go back to their country here and there in 6 months, whatever the case is. But my friend has a family, a wife, children, school system, right? All that is important. They're already in the house. It's a 2-family house. They live in one unit, parents live in the other unit. And they're like, you know what? Parents want to retire. Maybe I can renovate this to my liking so that we can all fit, comfortably. And then when my parents actually do retire, if they don't come back, I can rent out that other unit. And that's where that 203K comes in, right? So if they list that property, a 2-family in a Bergen County town in New Jersey, it's going to fly off the market. It's going to go way over asking, to the point that I don't even know if my friend could qualify or win that offer, win that bidding war, right? If it was just someone else's house. And even if his parents listed it and they were, and some families are like this, they were just looking for the best offer, the best dollar, or because they needed it to survive for the rest of their retirement, which, you can't knock. They worked hard and that's kind of what they were banking on. Then imagine you're, family, son, daughter, whatever, not being able to actually win the bid to afford it, right? So in this case, they can kind of meet in the middle somewhere and say, well, you're not going to sell it for top dollar, but you're going to be helping out obviously your family, your grandchildren, and majority of people would do that, I'm sure. However, there are those outliers that would say, nope, I need top dollar. Doesn't matter for family or not, right? Unfortunately. So in that case, okay, what can we do? How can we structure this deal so that everybody wins, right? You could take some equity from the parent's side and they can gift it to the buyer, to their family member, to help them with down payment and things like that. We could do renovation loans where in the open market they might not be successful with getting an offer accepted, but in this one it doesn't really matter because it's family, and now we could renovate the property to our liking, right? We can do additions, we can update it, we can make more space, more bedrooms, more bathrooms, whatever we need to do. And I've been telling everyone close to me, hey, start looking into your network, start putting it out there that you're looking, that you're in the market, whether it's your parents or just friends and acquaintances. If there's a certain town you want to be in, what connections do you have to that town where people can, that live there can tell their neighbors, hey, if you're thinking of selling, I have someone who's, ready to go right now. And let's start working on that pre-approval too. So they could say, I have a pre-approved friend. They've been looking. They can't find anything. They would love to be in this town. And if you're looking, to retire or, go down to Florida, whatever the case is, let me know first so I can help a friend, a great person that's going to buy your home and raise a family in it. A lot of people like to hear that too when they're letting go of a property because they have a lot of attachment to it, especially the people I'm talking about that are older, raised their family, retired, or, family moved away and they're towards the end of their working career or towards the end of their life or whatever the case is. And, unfortunately, you got to try to jump on those opportunities, right? It's just the game we're in. So definitely start to look at that and plan for it. Now, talking about these 203Ks, there's a lot that goes into a renovation loan, right? It's not as straightforward as just a regular loan. I want to touch on it a little bit. If you have more questions, definitely reach out to me. But, again, two of my friends in that boat, right, have been looking to take over properties from family and are considering renovating. One really seriously, one he doesn't necessarily need to do it, but wanted to look into it. So how could it work, right? So the renovation loan, especially if you're doing some big additions or gut renovations or changing the footprint of the property overall, it's going to take some dancing, some manipulating, massaging, a lot of moving parts, right? To figure out the numbers and figure out how much you can actually get and what you can actually renovate. So first we do the pre-approval and we kind of say, okay, here's what you would qualify for a mortgage, and then what's your budget monthly payment wise, right? Do that dance and try to figure out a sweet spot there. And then we take that to what you want to do to the property. So if you're expanding, adding additions, changing the footprint, the layout, moving staircases, whatever the case is, you're going to need an architect, and an architect is going to be able to draw blueprints and plans, and then you take that to a contractor. The contractor can look at the blueprints and plans and kind of bid it out, take it to a couple different contractors, see who's going to give you the best deal. It's not just about the best deal though, it's also about the reputation of the builder, the developer, the contractor, whoever it's going to be, to get the job done, right? Maybe someone who has history working with renovation loans, history working with banks, history working with draws and inspectors, right? These are all things that go into a 203K loan. They don't just give you all the money up front when you close. They put it into an account and you kind of draw from it as the build progresses. So those are things to keep in mind too, but there's a lot of moving parts, right? So my friend is in the beginning stages, already kind of talked to his family that wants to retire, his parents, and kind of came to an agreement on a price or a value, and now has moved forward with an architect to draw up some plans to make it the house that they want. Because prior, they were living in one unit, but it wasn't big enough for their family, right? So now they want to take over the property and then make it theirs. And that's something I've been, coaching them too. Hey, a 2-family in Bergen County, you got to try to hold on to that if you can. You like the area, you like the school system. Try to make that house yours as much as possible before you just sell it or your parents sell it, and then you got to go, play in this market that's like playing in traffic, right? It's crazy out there. Don't want to do that. You definitely want to try to keep this property if you can. And he listened to the advice and is trying to work that out. So hopefully that all works out and they get a great home that then they can move out of and rent out completely and kind of have as a cash flowing property when they go on to the next move. Right, so that's a great way to do it, and basically just buying the property from their parents with a renovation loan, right? Great idea if you can do it. If you've been struggling in the market, start putting those feelers out there. Let everyone you know that you're looking for property in specific towns. Do they know anyone where you can try to snatch something up off market? Now, the second scenario, best friend of mine called me and said, hey, I'm looking to buy this house, parents, in-laws, whatever the case is, and what's the best way to do it? Should I just refinance it? Should I buy it? Should I keep my in-laws, should I keep the parents on it or get them off completely? And I said, well, look, you have 3 options, right? And all of these have different pros and cons and tax liabilities. Some of them trigger, are a taxable event. So you have to talk to a CPA, which I can't advise on, but I know a little bit, but definitely talk to a CPA, right? So what are the 3 options? Well, the easiest would be just to have them add you to the title of the property. So now you're an owner, maybe you and the wife, right? Add you to title. So you're technically an owner of the property. And then maybe you just take over the mortgage and start making the payments for your parents or your in-laws or whoever it is. The bank wouldn't really know the difference. And to be honest, banks just want to get their money at that point, right? I remember when my father passed, we had the mortgage in his name. We were still paying it. And they didn't really ask questions till it was time to sell it. And then we had to send in, death certificates and things like that. But up until that point, we were just paying it. And they were just happy with getting their money and it was, a couple of years. So you can do that and just take it over and say, hey, we're going to make the payments for you. Just add it to the title as owners. And maybe that's something they're willing to do where they're like, okay, just take it. The downside of that is if you miss a payment, your parents or in-laws, whoever it is, credit is on the hook, right? Because they're obligated on that debt. So maybe they're not comfortable with that, depending on your situation. But that's option 1 and the easiest, right? You just, hey, add us to the title. So we're owners. We'll take over making the payments for you so you don't have to worry about it. The second option is a refinance, right? So now the parent could say, okay, I'm okay with that, but I want you to be obligated on the debt too, just so I feel safer. In which case, the parent can refinance the mortgage, add the children, right, the adult kids on it, and now everyone's on the mortgage, everyone's on the title deed, right, everyone's an owner, and everyone's obligated to the debt. That's another way. It still keeps the parent or the in-law on, but closing costs are a little bit better. It's a refinance. It's not a sale. You don't necessarily need attorneys involved or anything like that. It's just a little bit easier to do. And then the last option would be a straight up sale. Right? Hey, I'm going to buy it from you. Then we have to figure out the value, how much you want to sell it for, how much you want to walk away with, right? Mom and dad or in-laws, how much you want to get from this sale, and then what can they qualify for, right? So it's a little bit more, again, of a dance and figuring out those, that puzzle. It's definitely doable. It's just another, option. And that would trigger some type of a taxable event in most cases because there's a transfer of ownership and an actual sale. But it, gets mom and dad or in-laws out of the way, and then adult children take over from there, and it's their house. They bought it. They own it. And some people like that more, right? They want to actually go through the process of buying it. They want to take over. And then maybe you can even tack on to that a renovation type of loan to now when you get in there, you renovate and make it yours, right? Just a couple different ways to make that happen. Again, in this market, we really have to be creative with how we're going to acquire this real estate. And unfortunately, we have to look to the people that have it and who's in our network, who's retiring, who's moving away, that we can kind of snatch up some property from and work out a deal that works for everyone, win-win. They may not get the best possible offer, right? Because they're not listing it with an agent. And statistics show if you list with an agent, you're going to get the highest value of your property because they're going to market it differently. They're professionals. That's what they do. But they charge for that too. So then their commissions are involved as well. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk a little bit about the economy before we wrap up. So we're going to talk about unemployment, CPI, jobs report, right? All these things. So unemployment came in lower than expected, but also there were some significant layoffs at major corporations, right? So new jobless claims may be lagging in that regard because that news came out. There were some layoffs at big corporations, but then someone would say, well, why would the employment report be lower? It's because some of that is lagging, right? It just takes time for it to hit the report, hit the data that they're actually looking at. So maybe in a month or two that would go up, but also because there's a strong demand for labor in the workforce, people are losing their job and then probably applying to something or getting snatched up by headhunters or other companies looking for labor. So they're not actually filing a jobless claim, right? They're not filing for unemployment, so they never hit that report, so unemployment stays low. That's kind of the weird time that we're in, where some industries, some companies are struggling, there's layoffs, inflation is high, and they're laying people off, but then those people are still getting jobs because the job market is healthy and, payrolls are up and there's a demand for labor, right? So just a little bit of a weird kind of situation that we're in, and why that employment number is staying low. Also, CPI and the jobs report. The jobs report is the monthly employment situation report, just known, in layman's terms, it's a jobs report. And CPI is basically inflation, right? Consumer Price Index, I believe it stands for, and just lets us know where inflation is at and where prices are at, cost of goods, things like that. So all of that has come in to show that things are good. Inflation is coming down slowly but surely. Jobs are strong, right? The labor market is strong. Unemployment is low and continues to be a little bit lower than expected. So all of that is what the Fed uses to determine, again, what they're going to do with rates. And as this information comes out, it does affect the information that they're going to assess in their next meeting, but it also affects the market. And when I say the market, I mean stock market, mortgage rates, bonds, right? All this information every day throughout the day is being traded and headlines and reviewed and analyzed, and then it's affecting rates. So rates were actually higher over the last 2 weeks than they were in the past, because some of this reporting is signaling to investors and the people that kind of, market makers, if you will, the people that pull the strings kind of behind the curtain, that the Fed is probably going to continue to hold rates where they are. Probably not raise them, but at least hold them where they are. They're not going to be cut. So they're still, moving forward, assuming that that's going to be the case. And that's just keeping rates a little bit elevated. They actually went up a little bit in the mortgage market over the last week or two. So rates are back to, I think it was like 2-month highs as of this month. So if I look here, I have a screenshot. So mortgage rates jump to new 2024. So mortgage rates jump to new 2024 highs after another report shows higher inflation, right? So again, CPI report, jobs report, two most important considerations for interest rates and momentum, and as far as economic reports are concerned. But the CPI up to this point was not really as important because inflation wasn't a major concern like it is now, because of all the money that was thrown into the system because of the pandemic. So now the CPI report, inflation report, is super important to what is going on in the economy. So just, again, these things are always moving and shaking and turning, and the Fed's job is to assess and decide what they're going to do with the tools they have, and the tools they have are interest rates, and if they're going to raise or cut or what. So it looks like they're going to be holding steady. Things are still up and down, and but still overall relatively good, right? The soft landing that they're trying to orchestrate to make sure everything, nothing really crashes and we don't have a recession, seems to be working. We'll see if that holds true and see what happens with rates. But we are still expecting rates to come down towards the end of the year, maybe not as early as expected. Again, last week we spoke about the March report. It's probably not going to happen. Maybe not as early as May or June, maybe later in the summer or end of the year. So we'll keep an eye on it. So that is basically it for this episode. Thank you for joining us. We'll close with our outro. The goal in life is to be mortgage free. Control your emotions, have integrity. If you want to use my likeness, I need equity. And if you're really trying to win, you need to bet with me. We will see you next week. Enjoy the week. If you have any questions about anything we discussed, definitely reach out. Take care. We'll talk soon.